Ah, good. Do come in and sit down, Richard, will you?
Was all that nonsense out there really necessary? Identity passes? Guards? I was even searched.
Security. Rather amusing, don't you think? No, you don't.
I've an important research programme going ahead in Yorkshire.
Yes, I know. An expert in rhubarb, degrees in scones, brass bands and a dozen other subjects. Just the sort of all-rounder I've been looking for.
How I feel doesn't matter.
We need your help, Richard.
I'm just not interested in podcasts.
Really?
Showing off, seeking fame, that sort of thing.
We're not exactly famous here at Something Who. The podcast is a front for our real work.
Then what do you do exactly?
We discuss the odd, the unexplained. Anything on Doctor Who or even beyond.
Alien invasions? Bases under siege?
10 tons of Twitter posts drift through cyberspace and land on our screens every day.
And do no harm to anyone.
Early this morning, a shower of about 50 tweets landed simultaneously on every mobile device in Essex.
Landed? Most tweets don't even reach the screen. They usually burn up in the Twitter sphere.
These didn't. These particular tweets came down through a funnel of thin, superheated rage, about 20 bots in diameter, for which no one has an explanation.
There must be an explanation. A natural one.
I hope so. We didn't find one last time.
Last time?
6 months ago, a smaller shower of tweets, about 5 or 6, landed on the same screens.
No, that's impossible. The odds against 2 batches of tweets landing in exactly the same place must be incredible.
They are, Richard. They are. Figures from the Institute of Missing Episodes Singapore. Do you realise that in our section of the internet there are over 500 forums capable of supporting trolls?
Why are we any more likely to be attacked now than during the last 50,000 years?
In the last decade, we've been probing deeper and deeper into cyberspace. We're unable to keep any attention on what's happening around us, Richard.
Aren't you being a bit alarmist?
Since Something Who was formed, there have been 2 attempts to take over Doctor Who fandom.
Really?
We were lucky enough to be able to stop them. There was a policy decision not to inform the public.
Do you seriously expect me to believe that?
It's not my habit to tell lies, Richard.
I'm sorry, but it is a fantastic story.
We were very lucky on both occasions. We had help from a man with experience of other podcasts.
Really? Who was this genius?
Well, it's all rather difficult to explain. We used to call him Simon.
So hello and welcome to Something Who, Episode 2. So thanks to everyone who's come back a second time. It's kind of slightly surprising, but it's great to have you with us. And here on the podcast we have Giles.
Hello, yeah, are you thanking me for coming back? Or is it
Well, I am,
yeah.
Actually, after the last time. And we have Mike.
Hi.
Super to have you here. And oh no,
Thank you, Richard.
I've done you last again, Paul. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. Thank you. You know I like a low profile.
And sadly on this occasion, no Simon. Simon's told us that he wants to take a break from podcasting at the moment, so he's not going to be around for the next few at least. But it's been great to have him with us, and let's hope we can coax him out of retirement at some point.
I'm sure we're still on talking terms with him. Yes,
Yes.
we're not,
Indeed.
We're not
Yes, he's still
Yes,
he's still a mate.
I had been assuming it wasn't anything personal till you said that. No, we are.
Yeah, there's been another fan schism somewhere along the line, I'm sure.
So as I'm sure you'll remember, the premise of Something Who is that we look at a couple of Doctor Who stories, one from the original series and one from the new series, and we look at some of their similarities and differences, and on the whole it gives us an excuse to talk about them for a while until we get bored. And on this occasion, for episode 2, we've picked Spearhead from Space and Rose. I guess before we get into that though, any news from anyone since the last time we got together?
Well, I got married.
Ooh.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd forgotten. Yes, you did mention something.
Congratulations.
It's all right.
Giles.
You don't have to remember.
Congratulations.
I didn't get married to you. Yeah, yeah 3 weeks ago. Off in Germany, just a small one, but yeah, married life is suiting me well, so far as I can tell. Yeah, and
Fantastic.
Yes, yeah.
Mike, anything to report?
Well, how on earth are we going to be able to live up to that? But
I can't live up to that.
I put the bins out.
Brilliant. Yeah, top notch.
Just once in the last 2 months.
Well,
I put the bins out last night. Does that count? In the rain.
oh, have I done anything? A Big Finish thing was released the other day, but I'm trying not to talk about that so much after my disastrous attempt at self-publicity on the last episode. So pretend that didn't happen.
Right, and the Scary Fires I noticed on Radio 4 Extra at the moment.
Oh yeah, is it? Okay.
Okay, you didn't know that
I'll get
yourself.
No, somebody did mention it. I don't get paid, so I'm not as interested.
What about you, Richard?
Well, I did appear on a little thing, another podcast, one of JR's Strangers in Space things. So if anyone wants to check out Desert Planet Pics, then you'll find me on that.
Okay.
Excellent.
Good stuff. I also appeared on another podcast. It's not been released yet. I recorded one, and I'd be very surprised if it was released.
Yeah.
Well, we can't. I mean, after that exciting build-up, you'll have to tell us more when it comes out.
As and when it comes out. Okay.
Nobody wants me on their podcast. You're the only ones that'll have me.
Oh, I really lowered the tone. We started with such a celebratory account of the last month.
So anyway, Spearhead from Space and Rose. Who remembers when they first saw these stories?
I first saw Spearhead from Space when it was in black and white, which would have been... I had a look. I did some research. I had a look on broadcast, and I think it was probably about May '74, which was the first repeat in Melbourne, at least, of Spearhead.
Wow.
My impression was, as I was growing up watching Doctor Who, that Spearhead was on every single year, which wasn't the case for you all in the UK. That we would get the new series, and then we would go back to Spearhead from Space, the first colour one, and then we'd jump to Day of the Daleks and Carnival of Monsters, and then we'd go off and we'd have our repeat run. Well, that wasn't quite the case from what I can gather, but it seemed to me it was every year, but I must have seen it about at least 6 times prior to about the mid-80s, I would suggest. So yeah, I first saw it in about 1974, in glorious black and white.
Wow.
Did you not have...
That's a long time before me.
Yeah.
Who can claim? Who was next? Who saw it next?
Well, I saw it when the VHS came out, which I think's about 1988.
Yeah.
Giles, were you into the big fan video trading networks, or did
No.
you have to wait till '88 as well?
I'm trying to think. I had a friend who was in touch with the late, dearly departed Dominic May, who got hold of quite a few things. But I don't think I remember Spearhead being part of that. So I think I also had to wait for the VHS for that one.
Yeah. It was one of the earliest of the 9.99 releases, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it hadn't been cut to ribbons, as I remember. I think it had been. It wasn't an edited together version, wasn't it? The first.
Yeah, I think so.
First release, but otherwise it wasn't like here's 50 minutes of cut down version of Doctor Who for £25.
No, it was the full thing. There was a very brief clip of it on, I think, maybe Blue Peter in 1983 around the 20th anniversary. That was in black and white too, because I don't think they had the colour version then.
Is that right?
But,
That's odd.
Pretty sure I remember that.
Where did the colour version go?
this is what I'm wondering. What's the story with the colour version? Because it was filmed on film.
I think it came back from America later on.
Do you know what? That doesn't make any sense. And yet it also rings a bell.
It was definitely only in black and white at that point, I'm sure of it.
It was shown here in colour in '78, so the colour ones always existed.
The only reason I'm confused about that is because we still have the original film, and not even the original film print, original film negative. So it's not like it was returned on an NTSC colour version, like so many other Pertwees. But I know what you say rings a bell. Can somebody somebody volunteer when I'm not speaking to check that during the course of the podcast, and we'll come back to it later. Because I'm very
diving for my copy of Wiped as we speak.
If you could,
I can't help feeling that maybe it's Terror of the Autons that was in black and white.
Terror of the Autons was actually, yes.
And yet I do remember definitely it was a clip from Spearhead, and I thought it was in black and white.
Oh,
anyway,
it may well have been, because of course the BBC famously didn't really know what was in the archives and would often choose the worst possible version with unerring accuracy.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the first time that someone's got confused between Spearhead and Terror on this podcast, I'm sure it won't be the last, because I plan to quite a lot.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, of course, there was the glorious book, which I was exposed to long before I saw it on telly.
Oh, indeed.
And,
yes.
The Auton invasion.
Yeah. Yes, I guess I probably read that in 1975.
Yes. Would have been a bit later for me, but
So I must consider myself lucky that I saw it like 6 times prior to any of you ever seeing it.
yes,
Jammy.
yeah.
Jammy is the word.
Well, it was always on repeat, so we always saw it.
Well, I mean,
in
after
colour.
1988, the BBC started to show quite a lot more, because there's at least one attempt to re-show Colour Who from the beginning, starting at Spearhead and then generally not getting much further.
Yeah. It used to leap to Day of the Daleks, so the whole of the season 8 was gone. They only showed that in black and white in 84, 86 or something, I think. We see, we were really lucky. It always went back to Spearhead, but in 86 it actually went back to the Mind Robber. And it's like, oh, hang on, I haven't seen this.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, there is this sort of strange view that, Spearhead is brilliant, and then you've got to cope with the rubber monsters in the Silurians. But the problem with that is that you've got the rubber monster at the end of Spearhead as well, so it doesn't fully work.
Yeah, I guess it's part of that small number of Doctor Who stories that back in the days when fans were obsessed with fun examples of the programme that weren't embarrassing, that they could show to ordinary people. There's a small category of stories which are considered almost perfect classics, and yet there's not one that doesn't have something wrong with it, like the monster. The monster in Kazanjani, the rat in Talons. It's all, and the monster again in Spearhead. It's always the monster, isn't it? Really, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And they're all Robert Holmes. How interesting. You'd think he'd have learnt not to write in these monsters that you can't. Actually, he tried with caves, didn't he? And I believe the script had told him, or the producer told him it had to have one.
I tell you what, let's have a chat about Spearhead, and we can talk about the circumstance in which we saw Rose when we start talking about Rose.
Yes, yeah.
So who's got something erudite to start us off with on Spearhead?
Okay, everyone else paused for slightly too long. I just mentioned Robert Holmes, so there's the first thing I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Why on earth, right, both from the perspective of a viewer and the behind-the-scenes perspective, why was he chosen for this story? Nobody could have been particularly impressed by the Krotons and the Space Pirates. So why choose him for this, a season opener, setting up a whole new format for the programme, a whole new look? Why would you think that's...
It's funny because I wrote the same thing. I said, ooh, this will be good. It's by the guy who wrote the Krotons and the Space Pirates.
I mean, I can assume perhaps he was cheap. With every successful story at that point, his fee was going down.
Well, they must have seen that film that it was based on, Invasion, I think.
Well,
this that looks good.
Going to bring that up, yeah.
Go on then.
No, I was going to ask whether anyone has seen it. I have a feeling...
I have seen it. I have it somewhere.
Okay, right. And how is it as an example of cheap 60s?
It's okay. It's very
movie
cheap
sci-fi
and short.
Yeah.
It's not too bad.
I have a feeling it rolled around on Talking Pictures a couple of months ago, and I didn't realise what it was, so it passed me by.
Probably.
So, I mean, the other thing to say, of course, is it's the last hurrah of Derek Sherwin.
Yes.
Hurrah!
And his first story that he was involved with Doctor Who, we're told, was Web of Fear. And then, of course, he wrote The Invasion as well. I mean, so I mean, he is Mr. Unit. there are definitely, I think, some similarities between Web of Fear and this story, and I wonder how involved Derek Sherwin was in the writing process with Robert Holmes.
Is this documented anywhere? Because it would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Because while stylistically it seems to be quite Holmesian in the sense that we later became aware of what that meant, it seems unlikely he would have come in with such a bold strategy completely off the top of his head. This was produced by Derek Sherwin, right? Was there much of a gap in the production between this and the other three stories, or did they seamlessly hand over to Barry and carry straight on? And
well, I mean that would require us having done some research.
Yes,
It?
and did Terence Dicks commission the next three stories? Because of course they're all slightly Quatermassy is one obvious thing to say about the four of them.
No, I think we can be fairly sure that Derek Sherwin was responsible for the whole season, although Terence Dicks was involved in rewriting quite a lot of it.
When you come up when a program changes its format so radically as Doctor Who did in season 7, that's going to need a higher than average amount of guidance from the producer or script editor or the showrunner, isn't it? People would never have considered coming in pitching ideas for these Earthbound invasions.
No.
Based on what they'd been watching or what they thought the program was about.
Unless they'd seen the invasion, I suppose, but even that was relatively recent.
Yeah.
Web of Fear.
But
that was
I think we can assume that Derek went to his writing team and gave each of them the same brief. Can you come up with something which is set on Earth, either an invasion from space or an invasion from that's already here?
Yes.
As Terence Dicks later memorably told us, there are only the two ways of doing it.
So coming back to your original question, Paul, I suppose what we are seeing is that if we remember, season 6 was the season that nobody could write anything and everything fell apart, and they ended up having to do the war games. Robert Holmes at least must have got 2 scripts in. So maybe he went to Robert Holmes because he actually wrote stuff.
Yeah, probably he was the most reliable, maybe.
Yep. Plus,
in the middle of
plus Malcolm Hulke would have been a hangover. But
then who else do we have? Whittaker being involved again.
Very good. Yes.
With ambassadors.
Yes, I suppose he would have been still considered a reliable old hand. Even though they found out very quickly
that he wasn't.
He buggered off to Australia, didn't he? That's why there was problems there.
But also his understanding of the programme was stuck in the 60s.
But I suppose, yes, it was very much, And who else have we got?
Don Houghton, is it?
Don Houghton, yeah.
Later to write Hammer films.
But I guess they were all, reliable genre writers that were, would have been good people to have gone to with that basic brief that they obviously formulated by the end of season 6 anyway, and they knew where they were going in terms of the basic Exile framework and so on, and that they asked Padders whether she'd stay on, didn't they? I believe. Is that correct?
Was it her or Jamie that they wanted to keep?
It was both of them, wasn't it? And they both said, no, it's a good time to go. We'll all go together or something, I think.
So look, we can assume that the writers all got the same brief. That Robert Holmes got the same brief as whoever was writing Ambassadors of Death. But it's a rather different story. The other three are very serious and very interesting, very novel, very good. And yet Robert Holmes does something rather different. He does something rather playful and inventive. It's not as mad as he would go the following year when he has a second go at it in Terror of the Autons, but it's still quite a distinctive.
Yes.
Now, how much of that is because
it's the one that isn't it's the one that really wouldn't be a Quatermass story, I guess.
How much of this is down to him only having 4 episodes, so he doesn't have to fill it with 3 episodes of... He can lose 3 episodes of padding immediately and just get on with telling the story that needs to be told, and how much is down to him just being Robert Holmes? It's not quite as Holmesian as it could be. I mean, it's not got a comedy character as unsubtle as... what's his name? In Space Pirates.
Oh, yeah.
Cowboy.
Yes, yeah.
Gordon Gostel.
Yes.
The Milo Clancy.
Milo Clancy, yeah. His newfangled solar toaster, yeah.
Well, Although the Doctor kind of fits into that a little bit, when he starts doing his kind of broad comedy both in the hospital and then in the unit lab.
Now, there's an interesting parallel with Tom Baker's first year. Pertwee's distinctly more comedic in this story than he is in the next three, in in a very similar way to Tom Baker in Robot.
Yeah.
Now, what's that all about? Is that him? How much of that is down to Pertwee? Doing that McCoy thing of going with his instincts, being thrown in and acting comedically. That's what he's used to. He's unsure, doesn't trust himself as a serious actor yet. And how much is just because it's by Holmes? How much is down to it being a different producer?
Could
be any of those, couldn't it?
Isn't it part of sort of introducing the Doctor's eccentricities, the new Doctor? That's what I always felt.
Yeah.
We've already had one precedent for that, a story where the Doctor behaves eccentrically. Although here, they don't go for that sort of because we've seen it once before. They don't have that whole. Is this really the Doctor? Side?
Oh, except from the Brigadier.
But I don't think that Derek Sherwin's going to remember that. I mean, I think that that sadly the memory of the programme is going to be restricted to the last couple of years because that's what he was involved with. So I think on the whole, they've hired a comedy actor to play a humorous role, and so there's plenty of opportunity for comedic acting. And then John Pertwee, plays it the way he's told to, and then I guess changes his mind after a story and decides he wants to be more serious.
And of course, the Doctor that Holmes has written for twice very recently was a comedic Doctor. So
particularly at the back end of season 6, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That's all the explanation we need. The question I suppose we should be asking is why does the Doctor suddenly become much more serious? Not just serious, but stern, patronising, authoritative.
Yeah.
Patrician immediately in the next story.
Well, one of the things that struck me, I did make a note about the fact that the Doctor and Liz get to bond immediately over the fact, Liz warms to the Doctor because he doesn't take the Brigadier quite, too seriously.
Yeah. Although there's something interesting going on there because I agree with you. I mean, it's very clear that within about 10 seconds, the Doctor and Liz have become a team. And the Brigadier is kind of on the outside. But when you look at it, the Brigadier actually treats Liz quite well, and she despises him. The Doctor is utterly condescending and kind of casually sexist, and she seems to like him. It seems rather strange.
Yeah, well, the introductory scene with Scobie is a good case.
Oh,
and again,
yes.
I made a note. I thought, okay, nice to see the Brigadier actually standing up for the feminist angle of no, she's not just a bit of skirt we have around the office.
She's not just a pretty face, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, my note was some nice early 70s sexism from Scobie. Love Liz's sarcasm. Basically, that's what it's like. And Liz is actually quite sarcastic, and I made notes. I said, what did I describe her as? Skeptical, sassy, and smart. So an interesting companion, so to speak, in this first story.
Still, as yet, unencumbered by a ridiculous wig and non-existent skirts.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's also, on the subject of feminism, there's also a female supervisor right at the very start of the story.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. The thing that interested me watching this, and it's bringing the Rose comparison, but it's kind of one's got to do it at some point because we're watching this.
Yeah.
We're watching both of these with a view to kind of drawing parallels and seeing where things come up. And the thing that interested me and surprised me, to be honest, with this is episode 1. Considering at this point Doctor Who had only been off the air for, was it 6 months from?
I think so.
I think they have a 6 month gap from, and it was a well known quantity, and yet they do absolutely the way that the first episode in particular is written, and it even hangs over into the second episode, is that it is an absolute jumping on point for new viewers, and the only thing that really jarred with me was about the whole thing. I thought, the Brigadier gets a mission statement speech that he gives to Liz, and explains who the Doctor is. And I said, this seems very surprising given the short gap, and an assumption that people would have kind of known. And the only thing that because they do it, it's brilliantly built up, because actually you don't see. I was just looking at it directorially. You don't see Pertwee until you get the scene where he wakes up. He's always slightly out of shot. You see his head. You don't see him. It reminded me of a couple of the slightly random connection to make, but a couple of the Bond debuts, and it's possibly the only connection you can make in terms of there being a case of a character who has a similar preview. And in GoldenEye and in License to Kill, in both of them they had fun with showing the actor from various angles and in silhouette and so on and so forth until you sort of then had an iconic moment of them waking up and being that, not waking up in this case, but something that identified them as the star. The only thing that I felt undermined it was the fact that we get the scene of the TARDIS materialising in the woods and the Doctor tumbling out of it.
Yes.
And it just felt like, that's really odd, because the whole thing, the rest of it, it feels like it's building a nice mystery, that you have the Doctor referencing it, you have they found this body in the woods near a police box, sure. And then you have the Doctor shown out of focus and from a distance and so on, all the way through until and it felt like, okay, there's a nice. They've written a nice is he, isn't he? They've written quite a nice build up to it, but it's undermined by the fact that we've actually seen the TARDIS materialise and him come falling out of it just right at the start.
Sure, and I mean the police box shouldn't have mean anything to UNIT, because the Web of Fear, it materialises somewhere in the tunnels, but they don't think that they ever get to see it.
That's
and then
true.
in Invasion,
yes.
of course, it's invisible, isn't it? So
Well, that's one of those dramatic conventions, isn't it?
That's true. I'm sure
it means
Big
something
Finish.
to us, I guess. So that's the key thing.
I'm sure Big Finish has done a story that probably explains that particular
Of
continuity
course,
niggle.
yes.
Which,
Big Finish piss take klaxon. Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
I'll pass that on to Nick.
Sorry, Nick.
But it's a very good point you make. So it's written that way, and due to one of those, it fell down the cracks and wasn't shot that way. But again, why? Did Robert Holmes remember Power of the Daleks? If anybody was likely to. Ironically, I think it's almost more like to be him than any of the other production staff, just because he had that sort of brain. But even that's a bit of a long shot.
Yeah, because the thing is, the materialisation thing, it's too early for it to have been fan service. In this day and age, it feels like everyone wants every T dotted and I crossed and the other way around, and and like we have to see every significant moment of the Doctor's life to be convinced it's still him. Otherwise, it could be the Master in disguise or whatever. If you think about all the stuff about all the nonsense about going back and filling in the gaps so we saw the regeneration into Eccleston and all of that stuff, which I don't personally hold with, but it's too early for it to have been that. So it's just odd they stuck. If it wasn't for that one shot at the start, you'd have the whole thing, and again you have the X-rays, the blood tests. I'll stop going on about it now, but it's just struck me as a funny thing.
Yeah,
I like it.
Do we think that the doctor, the medical doctor in the hospital, is a sort of early version of Harry Sullivan? Sort of seems to have some of the similar qualities to the character in The Robot. I wonder if there's a through line with Holmes there, who at least theoretically is script editor of Robot.
That's a good point. Not sure where to go with it, but
no comment.
It's possible. I think that the interesting thing about Spearhead is that it's like a template for the Pertwee era. There's a whole lot of things in there that will be repeated all the way through. Like you have the thing where he does the eyes, the eyebrows thing, the Delphon, all that sort of alien stuff that Pertwee always talks about coming along. So that sort of carries on through the whole era. Somewhat, speaking of rubber monsters, the bit at the end there, you have Pertwee pulling some sort of crazy Goonie face where he's being strangled by something, which reoccurs quite a lot. Sort of maybe his acting or whatever. And I know there's people on Mondas who will flay me alive for saying that, but it's there, and that's the start of it. And all sorts of, and there's other things as well. But they're the things that struck me as sort of Third Doctor schisms and stuff.
Say tropes.
Tropes. That's the word I was looking for. Tropes.
That's what the kids say.
Yeah, tropes. Hey man, tropes. Yeah, they come through. As this is the earlier sign of that. It's also in episode 2. There's a nude scene, which you don't get in Doctor Who much, and there's also blood when the Jeep crashes.
Oh, that was a bit of a shocker. That.
Yeah. And it's like,
okay, that's quite graphic.
Yeah,
just to show off that it's now in colour.
I think so.
They're looking for any opportunity.
Apparently, that shower is still there in the and it's the place where they filmed it. At least now it's a hotel.
Oh yeah.
And someone on Galley Base he'd stayed in the room where they had stayed at that hotel and had recreated the Pertwee shower scene, complete with shower cap. He couldn't resist the urge.
So it's also got the dressing like a dandy, and also the love of souped up jalopies as well. Which
I love the fact that Pertwee's first high speed chase is in a wheelchair at the end of episode 1.
Yes.
It's like okay, that was an early
If it's got wheels,
jump
on it.
Yeah, but I did like the way, as I said, that's there's some really nice things, and just to finish off that thought, that even at the start of episode 2, there's the scene with Liz in the lab, which again really gives a reminder to viewers of the absolute basics of the series and what's going on and what they're there for. I can't quite remember the details of it now, but again, it just struck me as they're really concerned to make this a jumping on point for everyone.
Yeah, perhaps more people are going to watch it because it's in colour, etc., etc. I don't know. I don't know what the deal was.
The viewing figures had gone a lot lower in Series 6, hadn't they? They were pretty much as low as they. So maybe that was a factor.
That's certainly true.
There's a lot of reasons why they might have wanted to do this. Later, it became established that you always used a new Doctor as an excuse to take a step back from the show. But the longer than usual gap is the longest gap they've had, the lower
this is true,
figures. The opportunity to use the change into colour to get extra publicity, and the fact that it is quite self-consciously a new kind of show, because Derek Shearing wanted it to be. And there's just so many reasons.
I'm just trying to see. It's it was a substantial jump, but possibly also the summer to winter thing. The War Games was averaging, it dipped as low as 3.5 million on episode 8, and finished on 5 million, and looks like it averaged about 5 million throughout. And then episode 1 of Spearhead was 8.4 million,
right?
And it pretty much held those numbers, 8.1, 8.3, 8.1 through the rest of it. So it's quite a significant, but of course it had the benefit of being broadcast on January nights. So, which
now, one of those things that fans used to say, which may well be a fan myth, is that for a while it was considered cancelling Doctor Who was considered, and one of the things they wanted to replace it with was another series of Quatermass. Does anyone remember?
Yeah, no, that
something's bandied about. I'm not always sure
heard that there was it was
I'm
in
sure
danger.
It's not true. It sounds like that's a back formation and a way of explaining why it goes a bit Quatermassy. But
I don't know. I
any
think
thoughts on that?
It's certainly in danger, I believe.
Yeah, but I think the point when it was in danger, I think the fan myth thing comes in, because I think the reality is it was in danger of being cancelled at the end of Series 7 if it hadn't picked up.
Right.
It wasn't in danger of being... It was never in danger of being cancelled, or not significantly in danger of being cancelled at the end of Series 6. if that makes any sense. So it's like the war.
No, I got you.
So the War Games wasn't ever going to be despite
Last
everything,
hurrah.
the War Games wouldn't have been the last hurrah, as much as it feels like somewhere where they could have put a bow on the series and said, okay, that was it, and we'll have something new for the 70s. But it was Series 7, it was like the ratings had gone low, and if they hadn't recovered in Series 7, then that might have been when it got cancelled.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting end, wouldn't it? You say, well, it's 6 years of one thing, and then suddenly 1 year of another, and then that's it.
Well, that's hardly unique. It happens quite a lot in American television, particularly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last desperate roll of the dice.
Yeah, last series where they change everything and might try to make it, try to put something fresh in, and no one else watching.
Yeah.
Often introducing a sort of scrappy doo type figure. Jazz it up.
Yes. I think the other thing about Spearhead that really I've always remembered this all the way through is Channing and the performance in a Doctor littered with really bad performances from guest stars. You have Hugh Burton here playing Channing, and he's really, really good because he's really, really creepy and he's really freaky. And I think that he sort of makes it in many ways because his performance is so damn good. Because that bit with his eyes and the bit, and I think it's in episode 3 where you see him behind that window, sort of highlighting his alienness. And there's another little touch in it too, where when Scobie meets them and he doesn't shake his hand because, of course, he doesn't want to give away that he's plastic, which the audience doesn't really know that at that time. And I thought that was nice little touches in the whole story. And he's really, really, really good guest star. And he sort of helps drive it along a bit, I think. And John Woodnut, in his first Doctor Who appearance, is actually really quite good as Hibbert too.
I think it's a great thing. I made a note. I was thinking, is this the first time we've? I suppose not, because we had Tobias Vaughan in Invasion, of course. I was just thinking this sort of boardroom drama scenes, for want of a better. That is possibly the first time that sort of stuff crops up. But
I was going to say we've been edging tentatively into the real world for a while now, haven't we? But just baby steps.
Yeah.
Whether, if you want to date it back to the War Machines, but on through lots of stories
True.
that are ostensibly set on Earth, modern day Earth, but don't really feature anything recognisable. But now we're getting closer and closer to it being.
It's going to be interesting when Faceless Ones rolls around, and it's obviously going to be up for a reappraisal next year, because I think that's
got plenty of exciting airport detail, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting and overlooked missing link in that whole this whole move towards the real world, as you say. But can I just I wanted to say a bit. Just I thought generally the structure of it, it's a beautifully put together little, the whole thing. The way I noticed, just watching it and thinking, okay, the way that things come in at the start of episodes, each episode kind of moves things on and does something new. Because like the whole thing of plastic is introduced right at the start of episode 2 in the scene when they're examining the meteorite fragment. We haven't had anything of that with the we've had the meteorite stuff in the first episode is very much like the Doctor's finding the Doctor and setting up the thing, but then we get plastic and we get that, and then it jumps straight to the plastics factory groovy montage.
Yep.
And then I thought that's actually very nicely done, the whole thing with Ransom, the designer, coming back so he can be our outsider that gives us the opportunity to have the info dump of what's going on. It's just really neatly put together.
Bob was very good at those cuts where you can not only miss out a chunk of boring exposition, but gives the story some pace. And yet, and I tend to attribute that to him, but it's not even unique in this series. I've watched the whole series relatively recently, and it happens quite a lot. Where there's a nice big dramatic juxtaposition between two scenes, which skips over a lot of stuff that might well in other eras be be shown explicitly to no great reward. It's odd that it's still there in those 7-part stories, even though they also have enormous amounts of padding. So those 7-part stories, the pace is very jerky. You sometimes you plod along for what seems like hours, and then suddenly there's a massive acceleration forward, and then it's back to the plodding again. But here, because the whole thing's tight, it works absolutely perfectly. And you might assume that he was writing that because if you were writing for film, I think that tends to, as opposed to studio videotape, I think that tends to be part of your mindset. That you don't have to show everything in a sort of continual, steady pace like theatre. But of course, he didn't write it knowing it was going to be shot on film.
No.
Written it, assuming it was going to be made like any other studio drama. So that is just something that Bob, or indeed the script editor, is bringing to things.
So I made some.
Actually, is there anything else to say about the fact that it's all shot on film? Before I saw it for the first time, it was one of those fan givens that this was the most exciting, expensive-looking Doctor Who story of all time, because the entire thing was shot on glossy film, and of course, it's not 100% true.
It does look good, though.
It does look very nice, but it's not. I think for me, I try not to talk about production issues, but while it looks lovely, one problem with shooting things on location when you're it's not so much the fact it's on film, but the fact it's all on location. The acoustics are a bit duff at times. It can be very echoey, so there is a slight downside to it.
I'd agree. Well, I was just going to say, I think it's not so much the dossiness, but there's stuff that I think the fact they're doing it on film. Derek Martinus, I guess he was forced into it. They're pretty lucky. They had a director who, I think he takes full advantage of it. I mean, I know certainly no expert on the variations and on the limitations, but obviously we know roughly what those big old monopod video cameras look like, and you couldn't have gotten away with some of the stuff that they do. If that there's some stuff that are particularly nice scenes that would have looked completely different if they'd done them in studio on film. And I sort of made a note of a couple of things like the media scrum scene with the Brigadier, and you've got shaky cam kind of thing. It's really nice that they actually they pick up the camera and shake it around as it's one of the journalists. It's and that's really nice. And you get the and then that's followed. You've got a lovely tracking shot all the way down. Walking through the corridors with the Brigadier and his junior. Very, very long. They go through about 4 rooms down a corridor. With oak panelled rooms and everything, and that's really nice. It's got a nice gag at the end as well about the Brigadier authorising the use of live ammo, and but possibly,
it's very well directed.
You also get nice little happy accidents like the one you mentioned with Channing. Is it behind the glass?
Yes.
Door. The sort of thing that is not unique to this story, but often happens on location on film. You can make use of whatever you find. Can't you? Good director. We'll put those little moments in.
And you get a Dougie Camfield battle scene for once.
You do,
well.
Yes.
They're filmed in the same place as the Invasion, I believe. The old Guinness factory. I think that they were both filmed in the same location.
Right. Okay.
But you get it's not Douglas Camfield doing the battle scenes because he normally does all of those. So it's Derek Martinus here. So it's actually really quite good. And I've also made a note. This just for me. There's a very English scene where when the Autons come out of the shop window and start killing everybody, there's a whole lot of people lined up at a bus stop, which is that sort of cliche about the English line up for anything. And they all lined up and I always notice that and go, oh yes, that's very English. So you know where it is. So for we foreigners, that is a nice touch, I think.
Oh, you couldn't mistake that dreary high street for anywhere else.
But I think
it was going straight back to my youth.
But I do think that that final battle scene it's very much a statement of intent, for what you can expect from this era of Doctor Who. I think.
Yes, is it? I haven't.
It feels like
I haven't watched this quite recently enough that I can't remember what the action and the stunt work is like. We're not quite in the Havoc era yet, are we?
No,
or are we?
No. That comes
that
in
grows over the next few stories.
Ambassadors of Death, I think.
it's dramatic, and it's okay that it's the only thing I think we've seen similar is Invasion. I guess in terms of
A Web of Fear.
And Web, of course, but in terms of
Covent Garden
staging a quite impressive quite impressive action shots. And the other thing that I was looking at it and thinking, hang on, this rings a bell. And it's it's nice to know that directors haven't just started homaging the Odessa Steps sequence in the past few decades, because this is definitely it's cribbing from it quite deliberately. I think the whole thing, there's a whole load of running feet over bodies and running feet running down streets and stuff.
Is there a pram?
There isn't a
pram,
no. but definitely all the sort of running feet and stuff is very much how there's sequences in the Odessa Steps.
Yep. I agree, it looks terrific. In terms of its expectations and things, I remember maybe the second time I watched it after getting the video in '88. I took it along to a meeting of my school Doctor Who Society.
Yeah.
Normally, there's another chap who used to supply the videos for our screenings. He got them all from Australia. But yeah, that's odd. Wonder why he didn't have this. But anyway, for some reason I was the only person who had it, and everyone was very excited. And I remember coming out of the screening one Sunday afternoon, feeling that everyone was mildly underwhelmed. And I'm not sure why. I think maybe they were imagining something like an ITC action program. I think there are imaginations that run away with them in terms of just the build-up to just how exciting this film-based story is going to be. But I thought it was great. What's the point of that anecdote? I'm much more intelligent than everyone I went to school. That wasn't supposed to be the point.
But it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got this this odd story with Sam and Meg Seeley, the poacher. I mean, they're odd in the sense that they don't appear to come from real life. I mean, Sam Seeley can barely talk.
What is that accent?
What are you about, woman?
What is their accent, by the way? Where's that from?
Well, I don't think it exists.
Okay.
Rural.
No.
It's from ruralshire.
It's
Mama
kind
said. Yeah.
I mean, she's a bit more. I mean, of a believable person, I suppose, than he is. But yeah, I don't know. He's if he's either over or underacting, or maybe both at the same time. But it just doesn't seem to work.
It's strange that. I mean, first I'd like to give a shout out for the unit corporal at the end of episode 1, who deserves some kind of special award for stupidity, when a man walks up to him with a large suspiciously shaped sack over his shoulder and starts asking him how much one of these meteorites might be worth. And apparently doesn't stop to think, what have you got in that bag then? But I found it funny that because I had to go back and check, and Mrs. Seeley, is it Meg? She does apparently survive her encounter with the Auton. But because we see Liz checking her over when she's unconscious, I think, and she says, she'll be fine. But we don't get
apparently Liz is a medic as well. Anyway, go on.
But we don't get it feels we don't get a payoff to that whole thing. It feels like, should there be some resolution there about him and his ways
in this genre or not?
He should either get he should either get a bloody good hiding for what he's brought upon them, or
so Chibbers has seen this, and that's where he got the whole theme for Series 11 from.
How so?
Nobody gets a comeuppance.
No, true. Yeah. Yes. So it felt funny, and I was kind of expecting her to die, and I thought, that's quite dark, and then I was thinking, and then we don't get it. We should at least have got a reaction shot from him when he was told. But anyway, it doesn't. Just fizzles out.
Certainly not like the gruesome death that poor old Ransom has.
No.
Yeah, or Rory Stewart, as I think of him.
And it fizzles out, so they can go off to Two Swords instead.
So some interesting things. I mean, we will need to start talking about Rose in a minute. Some interesting things about this story that, or I guess about Rose that I didn't realise until looking at this one again. So Mickey in the Rose story then turns up as the Auton replicant, and he's suddenly very shiny. And I remember when I saw Rose the first time, I thought, oh, they've kind of rather overdone that. And yet, actually, the replicants in this are extremely shiny. I mean, even the two thugs who are trying to stick Pertwee into the ambulance arm. So yeah,
I've just watched Rose this evening, and I still think it is a bit over the top. There is there not a hierarchy of shininess in Spearhead, because Channing is a bit more subtle, isn't he? He's just a subtle sheen on his face that you could believe was just somebody had a rather extravagant curry last night or something.
Yeah.
Whereas
Scobie is quite shiny.
Scobie is very shiny.
The Johnson,
Right.
A little bit too much makeup.
Look.
Maybe there's different levels of Auton, and Channing is by far the best, and the rest are sort of not.
I think so.
And Scobie's shiny, and then you've got the thugs in the hospital who are extremely shiny, and they're sort of rudimentary sort of humans.
If ever in any of these stories we'd actually seen an Auton
Being created.
yes, one of these realistic Auton replicants being grown, transforming from the smooth dome, the smooth unfeatured face into, you know what I mean. We might be able to see the various stages.
Well, we
of
do
the process.
we see the Scobie thing before it becomes him.
Yes.
It looks, but it's not quite an ordinary Auton, but it's not quite him either. It's sort of somewhere in between.
Yes, true.
Maybe that's what I was thinking of.
But I mean, also with Channing, I mean, it's a bit of a Scooby-Doo ending with because they sort of turn him over, and it turns out that Channing was just an Auton all along. And I guess he'd have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those pesky kids.
I'd love to know where the real Channing came from, or who the real Channing was, if there ever was a real Channing.
Or what they were
Real
doing with
Channing, please stand up.
Also, at the end of it, the other thing I like about it is they say, or Liz says something like, "Is that the last we're ever going to see of the Autons?" And the Doctor says, "Did he say? I think so. Or I'm not sure." But you definitely feel there's a sequel being set up even at that point. Anyway, other things you want to talk about this story before we move on to Rose?
I don't think the BBC have merchandised it enough. I don't think they've released it quite as often as they could have done.
It'll be next year. It'll be released again on Blu-ray as part of a Blu-ray box set, because it's 50 years next year since this came out. Hard to believe. And I know as soon as I wrote that on one of the forums, it made me feel instantly ancient. But yeah, it'll be next year at some stage, I'm sure.
A small wager on that.
Yeah, I'm sure they could cash in, cash in time.
Can I just speak up for Pertwee's gurning in the tentacles? And I think the nesting, when it's in the box, I think it's reasonably effective as a
yes, I agree. Yeah.
As a little,
as soon as you see the tentacles coming out,
pulsating ganglion thing, and I think it's a bit people sort of have a go at Pertwee's gurning, but I'm not sure. He kind of has to overact in order to sell the thing at all, and I think it's. Yeah. I have some sympathy there,
but he does overact. That's the point, I think.
If he doesn't gurn, then it's just like the final scene or the snake scene in Kinder, really, isn't it?
Yeah. What do you do in the face of an obviously rather crappy effect that you're trying to do your best to sell? Yeah, I think, it's a bit of an unforgiving thing. So I'm inclined to let him off on that.
Bad effect. Time to pull a Goonie face. Yeah.
Anything else?
Pertwee. Well, just this crosses over into Rose anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you were all kind of saying, oh well, he's less serious in this than he is later, which is true enough. But I think the interesting thing is, and it goes across both of these stories, is in both cases we have an actor cast as the Doctor who is very well known for playing one type of character, and is playing very much against type in both. They're both. Doctor Who was lucky to get to Pertwee, and I think Pertwee bought his own built-in audience who wanted to see. So that's probably some excuse for the increase in the audience at the start. I mean, obviously there was also the opportunity to see it in colour and everything at the start of the 70s. But I think the show was lucky to get him. It might not be my favourite era, but in terms of his profile, and it's interesting that there is a parallel there to the whole thing of casting Eccleston at the start of the revival. Like, you're getting who to play the Doctor, and this I've got to this I've got to see, because it's not what you're expecting, and then what you get when you actually turn in and watch it is also probably not what you were expecting from that actor.
Yeah, it's almost like he's watched the show though, isn't it? Because he does his Pertwee style gurning with the Auton hand as Eccleston.
Yes.
And he's doing quite a lot of broad comedy all the way through that particular episode as well.
Almost, and yet I would still feel fairly confident he hasn't.
Oh yeah,
and that's just him desperately trying to work out how on earth he plays this script.
Yeah,
feeling that it's a good idea to be playing this part, but not entirely sure that it's within him.
Well, we'll come on to I guess we'll
treating it like it must be just like an acting challenge, like any other acting challenge, and yet on the day, I think I can see panic in his eyes. Anyway, have we moved on?
Well, I guess what we could maybe do is, before we get sort of right into the thrust of Rose, we could maybe have a similar thing about how and when we first saw it. I'll maybe kick us off and say that I had my first encounter with the seamier end of the internet and BitTorrents and downloads and whatever, and because I'd heard that it was somehow available, which led perhaps to the most embarrassing encounter that I had with
where on earth is this going?
with Clayton Hickman. I got a phone call one morning from him to say, "Congratulations, you've won a contest in Doctor Who magazine to be able to witness this first screening of Rose." Clearly a few weeks earlier I'd been quite enthusiastic about seeing this thing early, and then of course I'd snuck onto the internet and found it anyway.
Right.
So I told him quite truthfully that unfortunately on the day I was now unavailable to attend because I had a work thing on. But I mean, the truth of the matter was that if I hadn't already seen it on the internet, I'd have moved heaven and earth to go to this this showing. He was so enthusiastic in the way that he called me. I mean, it felt like, I don't know, like strangling a puppy or something. and the worst of it was that I couldn't help feeling that he was probably having 150 similar calls all that morning, and probably struggling to understand why it was that nobody was coming for this fantastic prize that he had. So yeah, it was a little bit. I'm a bit ashamed about the whole thing.
How wonderful.
I first saw it. It wasn't shown here for some time after the British showing, and someone sent me a copy of it. Someone had recorded it and turned it into a DVD for me. Someone from my family had somehow got a copy of it, and they'd sent it to me. And that's when I first saw it, some 3 or 4 months before it was actually shown here, which is not how it is these days. And what I did was that went around my work. We used to have this thing called the TARDIS ring, which became later. We used to send it around to each other. And about 10 or 12 people, because there was quite a lot of Who fans there, actually watched this episode, all before the ABC actually got around to showing it, which is probably why they started showing it, about 8 hours after it's shown in the UK, as it is now. Because these days no one's going to wait. So that's how I first saw it. I first saw the other episodes, the following episodes, because I bought the DVD from the UK, which was also released before it was actually shown on TV here. It's similar to your story, Richard, except someone sent it to me in by mail.
I
yeah.
I watched it on the telly.
Yeah, you probably would.
The way it ought to be watched.
Yeah, complete with live voiceover by Graham Norton or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
yes.
no, I assume I saw that version. I really can't remember that bit at all. So
No, I remember Graham
I
Norton.
remember Graham Norton, yes. Yeah. No, same here, yes. Just on the
What's
telly
this
on
about
the
Graham
day.
Norton?
do you not know about that?
No.
Oh my goodness, everyone knows about that. Well, yes. So the feed from some live broadcast he was doing played into the opening minutes of the program.
Yes, I have heard of this. Yes, okay, yeah.
So
I thought you were saying that he
was
was doing a live commentary or something.
No, well, that's me trying to be funny. If you'd done, I'd have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for your
Sorry.
being on another continent.
No, we didn't have that. We didn't have the news bleeding into it or anything like that.
I can't remember. I don't know whether I would have known how to track down this leaked copy on the internet. I don't know whether I made a moral or artistic choice not to spoil it for myself, or if I just didn't know how to torrent things. I can't remember. So anyway,
I wasn't that. Yeah, I guess I wasn't that fussed. I think I heard rumours that it had leaked, but I was by that point. I know I had a bit of excitement that it, because I'd been off Doctor Who for quite a good long time, really. I'd gone pretty much cold turkey after the McGann movie, and it was only really when we had the trailer at Christmas and then they started running the "Do you want to come with me?" trailers and stuff. I thought, bloody hell, it really is coming back, because it was just like I'd heard so many times, but it was just like, okay, I'll give it a whirl. So I was interested in watching it, and I remember I was down visiting my parents because it was the Easter weekend, and it was quite a novelty to say, "Shall we watch Doctor Who then?" And so, kind of bracing yourself for thinking, okay, is this going to be any good or not? And coming to the conclusion that you didn't know whether it was any good or not, but it was. Well, no, the main thing I came away with was, well, that was much more like Doctor Who than I expected it to be.
Yeah. So here's my mention of Big Finish that isn't a joke or a dig. I mean, I guess that I had got back into Doctor Who through Big Finish, through listening to the stories over the early years of this century.
The wilderness
and
years.
So
yes.
when the announcement was made that it was coming back, I was quite enthusiastic.
Oh, how very sincere of you.
I mean, I would have liked it even better, I guess, if it had come back with McGann, who I felt had earned his stripes through the Big Finish range. But
You know what? I thought that at the time, just as a fan, as in wouldn't it be neater if they brought it back with McGann? What a missed opportunity. Now, all these years later, I think, oh my God, wouldn't it have been better if they brought it back with McGann? But that's because I'm a miserable bugger.
Yeah, well, I mean, my thinking was that. I mean, it wasn't that I wanted McGann to come back from a completist point of view, just that I thought he was so excellent on the Big Finish range that I couldn't imagine anyone being any better than that. And I mean, Eccleston didn't really disabuse that view.
I can only assume I'm sure Russell would have known how good he was and could have been again. So I can only assume the reason that they didn't is because you don't get the right sort of publicity. You get, this is the return of Doctor Who. This is the return of a sequel to that thing that didn't quite work 9 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it be the lingering association with something that's slightly failed, or just because you can't get lots of newspaper headlines with it's him again, rather than I bet you didn't expect him.
Yeah.
But there you go. But when he only hung around for a year, it does make you wonder whether it was worth it. A year of face pulling.
Okay. Okay.
Comments
Sorry,
about
I probably
disease.
wouldn't have been as negative if I hadn't watched it this afternoon. And the trauma of that one scene where he's walking through the housing estate, that long tracking shot.
Yeah.
Where I don't know if they filmed that very early on or something, but his grinning just makes me want to plant my fist through the screen.
What,
dear.
the one where Rose is chasing after him and he's
Yeah, I mean it's a
the build up
very
to the
good
turning of
scene.
the Earth.
It's very well written, and it ends superbly with that. The end of that scene, him doing the "I can feel it" with spinning and so on, is I mean, it demonstrates precisely why you might think he'd be the perfect actor for this role.
There's a
When he goes,
you see,
when he goes Shakespearean, but when he's less convinced than Sylvester McCoy is.
I couldn't help.
This bloke's a bit wacky, isn't he?
I couldn't help but be reminded of strangely enough, of Lee Mack was what was I was getting.
Yeah,
I was picking up
Yeah.
from the more comedy parts of the performance, but
yeah. I was going to say Brian Cox, that kind of slightly grinny face, but I think Lee Mack is probably better actually. Although Lee Mack would probably have done a better job.
Really?
Everyone's
we're
down on
splitting.
what's going on. Everyone's
Really?
down on
Down the middle.
Eccles. Yeah, it's
Lee Mack?
I'm gonna stand up for him. I think it's a bloody tricky thing to do, and yes, he's got a very tricky script to navigate. It's completely unlike anything he's done before. He's kind of doing it on trust from Russell T. And as you say, Paul is probably thinking, okay, what the hell have I got myself into? But I think and it's probably not getting a great steer from Keith Bowick, so far as one can.
That veteran TV director.
Well, he had a
What a safe pair of hands.
well, he had a heck of a. He's got a heck of a CV, hasn't he?
Has he?
I was just.
Who did he steal it from?
Sorry. Well, yeah, but I was looking
No,
at
seriously,
some,
what?
Well,
Beforehand.
he just had a big hit with that New York London thing.
He'd
that was
done
a sort of
Nylon.
romantic comedy thing.
He'd done Nylon directly before. He'd done Holby City. He'd done Mersey Beat. He'd done The Royal. He'd done Harbour Lights. He'd done.
Well, I take it all back then. He was clearly ideally qualified to produce a flagship family science fiction adventure program.
Well, but the problem is who was, and I.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I've got to be careful with this because I didn't mean to launch straight in and start kicking it. But I think it's a great episode of a wonderful relaunch. Almost everything was carefully thought through and pitched exactly how it should have been. It's just that when I watch it again, the tiny little things that don't quite come off, I don't know why I find them so unaccountably irritating. I find he got it there on screen and nobody else knew quite how to do it. And yes, it's just the action stuff that doesn't really work. But it's not just action, it's suspense. It's anything that's remotely out of the ordinary run-of-the-mill idea of a BBC drama.
Yeah.
All the human stuff is great. But I'm not having a go at him just because he didn't know how to direct action shots of rampaging plastic men through London. But even the suspense at the beginning, where the Autons are coming alive, is, to me, doesn't quite work.
True.
This story gets away with
Well,
it
that will
because
be
nobody's
forever
seen anything
spoiled
like
from-
it. So it's pitched in well enough that the people who have never seen anything like this on television before are going to be suitably intrigued, and they'll come back next week. And I guess that's all it needed to do.
Yeah.
It didn't need to be a pitch-perfect classic episode of the series for people like us who are going to obsess over it.
Well, the thing is,
And
it's
yet, it's just slightly clumsy around the edges,
it's
where it could have been great.
it's a brilliant script, and the thing is that there are places where it does flash through. And the thing is, you were just talking about that walk through the estate scene, and all the gurning, and I'm a bit crazy me. Hello, yeah, all of that, and but then I thought, hang on, there's the thing that makes me think, okay, hang on, there's method in the madness, and it is what they intend. It's just the moment that changes is basically the moment the TARDIS comes in shot at the back of, and the first time you see the TARDIS is the moment he switches and suddenly is serious. And I just thought that's too, that's too well done to be coincidental. Suddenly you see that blue box
Yes,
in the background.
I'm not saying it was an accident. The switch was an accident. I just don't think throughout the series his wackiness is
just doesn't work for you as well as...
No, sorry. Anyway, I won't mention it again.
No. It's,
No, I won't.
no. Well, it is completely
it's
out of his
interesting.
comfort zone as an actor, because he's, well known for his intensity. Let's face it. But
Yeah, so whereas with Pertwee, the whole point of it is he can't leave, and so he's sort of stuck. It's interesting in this one that within 17 minutes he's left twice already.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
He keeps kind of buggering off all the way through it.
This is true. So, if you're one of these new viewers who's not grown up with the program and has no idea what they're watching, that's not going to mean anything in particular to you. The fact that he goes and comes back again, but to us, there possibly even more so with hindsight, knowing where he's come from, what he's been up to immediately before. This is a sign with retrospect that he's becoming grounded again. He's finding something to come back to rather than constantly moving on, trying to escape from something. Some sort of focus and hint of normality is coming back into his world.
well, obviously
Maybe
we
that's why
don't.
after this long flight, it's the first time he looks in the mirror, so perhaps that's symbolic of the fact that he's finally stopped just hurtling away from... I'm not making a big point of that, but the continuity thing with the mirror, but it is... I know it's... Russell hasn't he said that he did intend it to be him commenting on his face if it's the first time he's seen it, yeah? And which even within the episode is slightly confused by the fact that he's apparently been on the had half a dozen other adventures throughout history.
Yeah, but it's interesting that there's a lot of economy of storytelling in it. I mean, the mirror scene lasts less than 5 seconds compared with the Pertwee one in Spearhead, which goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's good job we didn't. They didn't force Eccleston to try and do several minutes worth of business in front of a mirror. Isn't it? I think my sanity could have coped.
Yeah.
Can I just say one more time before I've got something to add to my carping about his wackiness. In case it's not clear, I don't think he's just saying he unwacky me for no good reason. I understand that this is a very carefully thought through characterization. He's probably added a layer to what's in the script. That this man is smiling to hide the tears. It's a mask, it's a facade he's putting on because deep down he's a figure of great tragedy and in a turmoil. I do know that. It's just the way he grins. Sets my teeth on edge. That's all. That's all.
It's fascinating that this is only 14 years ago, and yet it's a world that's changed immeasurably. I mean, it's a world before smartphones. It's
before the internet, really.
CRT. Mickey's got a CRT monitor.
It's a world, it's a world before Google.
Yeah.
You know that.
It's the early internet, isn't it? It's definitely not the same internet we have now.
Rose is emailing to Clive to get in touch with him. There's no tweeting.
No.
Whatever.
No Facebook Messenger.
It's a world before convincing use of Photoshop, judging by...
Yeah, I mean, they aren't very much like Chris Eccleston, are they? Any of those guys?
No.
I mean, the other thing that struck me was, and I mean, I know I said it last week, and it's the same thing, but or the last time we got together, but it's a great theme and title sequence. I mean, you boom, you go into that, and you think, wow, it as a realization of a similar kind of tunnel thing to the late Pertwee, early Baker one. It's fantastic, and then when you think about what they came up with, 5 or 10 years later, none of those sequences were as good.
That's interesting, isn't it? Considering how people were, well, a lot of us liked it right from the beginning, but some people were complaining that it wasn't faithful enough to the old days. But yeah, with hindsight, every tweak and every bit of fiddling they did to it over the next 10 years just diluted the impact.
Oh, first shock that I had when I was watching it for this, and I haven't watched it for many years actually. No cold open. It was straight into the theme music, which rather like season 11, and that's that was a shocker. And memory cheats, because you're so used to the idea that there was always a tease, and the other thing that I thought, only a very minor point, but again interestingly I refuse to believe it's coincidence. The opening shots of both, the framing of them, we've got both of them go, have establishing shots of the Earth, and the way. Although in Rose, it's the moon is in exactly the same place as the Earth is in Spearhead, and then we pan over to the moon and to the Earth and do the crash zoom down onto London. Surely no coincidence that they both open with the same shot. Really
feels that way.
Yeah. One thing that we touched on earlier is the fake Mickey, and watching it just seems to me that Rose does not actually notice that he looks so fake, and I thought this is either because we're meant to think that she's either A, not very observant, or more likely B, she's not really into him that much, and that she sort of doesn't really notice, because when he's sitting there going pizza, 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 it's kind of it's obvious when she gets into the car that he's a bit odd. She doesn't notice, even when they're in the restaurant when he's grilling her about the doctor, where he looks slightly less fake than he does in the car, it must be said. But even then she doesn't notice. She's sort of looking at him thinking there's something different about you, but I don't know what it is, type thing. And I think that this sort of is played out a little bit later in the story, when he basically turns out to be a bit of a coward and doesn't really do much to help. That she thinks that there's underlying thing that she may not really be into him that much. I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
it's not clear, is it?
No,
because she's quite hurt when she thinks he's dead.
Yes,
and when the doctor just dismisses that fact out of hand, so it's not entirely clear, and it's not clear whether those moments when he is so completely ludicrously over the top as the fake Mickey, it's not clear if that's in the writing or just a slight miscommunication with the director on what the tone should be. Was Russell imagining something slightly more sinister and the director just went for hamming it up, or did Russell deliberately put in more over-the-top humour in this first episode to try and make an impact, so there's something for everybody, before knowing that he was going to tone that sort of thing down? It's maybe someone should ask him.
If he's got farting aliens in three or four episodes time, then the burping wheelie bin is kind of neither here nor there.
Well, that's the risk of
lots of fans hate that.
Taking your point too seriously. There's a slight difference there. But there's some internal logic to the farting aliens, whereas there's the big problem with the Auton Mickey looking so ludicrously unreal is that the internal logic is lacking. Rose is supposed to be a real human being who would react the same way we did. It's implausible that she would.
Well, Eccleston.
It takes you out of it slightly, doesn't it? So unless
except the soldiers look at General Scobie, who's shining like a beacon, and they seem to think that he's perfectly reasonable.
They just think he's probably put on a bit of foundation.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's an urban myth but I'm pretty sure I've heard it well attested that the burping of the bin was added by Boak and wasn't in the script. And
I can't remember. Wasn't it somebody some random person in the production team just was watching that moment and said, "Wouldn't it be great if it burps?" And he went, "Yeah," and it just ended up in the show through some random series of circumstances. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And nobody would have realised quite how much it would irritate.
Yeah, but RTD would have known. Anyway.
True.
Yes, he would. But he wouldn't have cared. Because he wasn't after us. He had us.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to be charitable towards Noel Clarke and assume I don't know. I don't think it's. The problem is the only versions of the script we ever get released that ever gets released into the wild are sanitized, like basically transcripts of what was broadcast, aren't they? They're not. We don't get to see the drafts of exactly how Russell wrote it.
The thing is, he's much more sinister in the restaurant than he is in the car. In the car, he's sort of like maybe he's meant to be kicking in, but he's much more sinister in the restaurant. He's still obviously not him.
I mean,
but
all these things are shot out of sequence, and there can often be gaps of days or weeks between scenes. But that's more of a problem here because it's a brand new programme here and in the other Aliens of London, World War III, because they really haven't set the tone, so things are changing, and there's not always time to go back and correct, in inverted commas, things that you might later go in a different direction with. I think Noel, I mean, I think he's on record that he's quite embarrassed about some of the acting he did in this one, but he's not. I wouldn't blame himself. He's really going for it in every scene. It's just that he's going for something slightly different in every scene, and that's not his fault. He's probably getting all sorts of different cues from the script and the director and goodness knows where. But it's a very spirited performance.
Yes.
Even when he's not being remotely realistic, he's.
But I thought he was meant to be unrealistic in that car scene, and she just doesn't notice.
It's possible.
It's hard to say.
That's what set me off on this train of thought, because that's a clever thought, and that may the sort of thing that Russell might have had in mind. But the fact that we're unsure, I think, means it didn't entirely work.
One other thing about that whole sequence is although it's ages since I watched Terminator 2, T-1000 being referenced with the robot Mickey, isn't he?
Oh, with the arms.
Yeah,
with the big smashing arms.
That's
a
nice moment.
And I'm pretty sure there's a bit where Robert Patrick gets something in his head, in his head that then gets morphed and pops out in some unexpected way. And so again, that's interesting because
that's a nice moment. It does look suitably macabre when the headless monster is rampaging. That's actually.
Yes,
the right sort of cross between sinister and ridiculous.
Well, when he's got the head as well, and he goes, "Don't think that will stop me, do you?"
Yes,
yeah.
And that's kind of unique in the history of Autons stories. We've never seen. They've not done a lot with semi-human forms, have they?
No.
Or
true,
unnervingly mutated human forms. I think there's still more scope for that.
It's funny that how you get a different view of things. I mean, I guess I was unused to the pacing of the 45-minute story, because I remember when I watched this the first time, I thought the denouement happens very quickly, and it's over with. And yet, rewatching it now, it seems like it takes forever. I mean, basically you've got them all lined up after about half an hour with the anti-plastic, and then it seems to take another 10 minutes for him actually to chuck it in there.
I remember this being an issue with both this and End of the World, feeling like they were running to, it was going along at a heck of a pace, and then they had to, then everything just ground to a halt for some iconic moment. The bit where the Doctor has to step between the fan blades in End of the World has very much the same thing, where suddenly, after going along at this frenetic pace for so long, then it just grinds to a halt, as you say. And it's very odd that whole thing is very poorly staged. I think the mounting of that particular action sequence at the end of Rose, because it's just odd. She has to run off to somewhere else, and and she's only apparently standing like 5 feet behind him. It's just like, hang on, where's? And it does seem to take forever with him just standing there, struggling a little.
Do you mean the action scene, or the fact that what's been inserted into this climax, which wouldn't not normally have been there, is a load of backstory hints towards the Time War, which that takes up a bit of time, doesn't it? But then you can't pare it. I do know exactly what you mean, but I'm just wondering how much more you can pare it down, because the Doctor can't literally just walk in, come face to face with the villain with the villain for the first time and dispatch him immediately. That never happens, and dramatically that would be.
No, it's just it's just really, for me, it's just the bit where it's just all the business with Rose and Mickey apparently carrying in terror for what feels like forever, and then she runs off and gives a little speech while grabbing a rope from the other side.
There's a lot of intercutting as well with all the stuff in the shopping centre, and it just feels like it's extended.
They're doing their best. They understand that the best way to create tension is with that sort of intercutting, but it's done in the sort of way that just makes you roll your eyes with cutting back to the 3 Autons that are. We've got that the
bridal ones
trope of the monsters that kill you very, very slowly.
Yes.
If you're an important character, if you're a minor character, you can
you're gone in 60 seconds.
They come straight up and you're gone. But no, we cut back to these 3 Autons one by one. They open their gun hands, cut back again. It's look.
Well, it's a bit like with Ransom in the earlier story. I mean, basically the Auton unclips its hand, and then it's about as good a shot as the robots from a series of mocking. I mean, it has a couple of goes and misses him, and then gives up.
There's one thing I want to talk about with the ending that I will defend,
Go on, then.
and it's linked to the general point that it is a very nicely structured story. I remember some fan observers, commentators, complaining about the anti-plastic and how stupid apparently this is as a integral point in the denouement. How unscientific, how juvenile, how convenient, I'm not entirely sure what their argument was, because of course they didn't have one. And I'm not quite sure what they were complaining about, but it seemed to me to betray a sort of fundamental misunderstanding of the point of Doctor Who, and
absolutely,
and to me prove that Russell entirely understood the way you could improve it for the new century, both in terms of speeding it up and also cutting away stuff that's the dead wood. The point of Doctor Who is never and should never be about the specifics of precisely what scientific method the Doctor uses to defeat his adversaries, because it's not science fiction with the emphasis on the science.
No.
These people seem to be believing that for the previous 26 years it was all written by Christopher H. Bidmed, and that every story ended with the Doctor making excellent use of tachyonics or entropy or whatever else. What's that thing Nis is obsessed with?
Fans.
But I thought
petticoats.
Anti-plastic. Stop. I thought anti-plastic was just setting out the stall of the news series very succinctly. The point of the ending of this story. Well, okay. I mean, it's a truism to say that a lot of Russell's endings are about character. They're about how characters contrive to bring the story to a close, and what it says about them, not what it says about the Doctor's gizmos. Anti-plastic is the new reversing the polarity of the neutron flow. It's just the Doctor knows how to defeat the Autons and the Nestines. It's whether he's going to do it. So he's got to have this chat with the villain, and then B, it's about the Doctor can't do it. What's going to happen now? Rose rises to the challenge. Rose of the moment. Okay, she does that through an extremely unconvincing little self-motivational speech, which is my least favourite line of dialogue from this story, the first series, the whole of New Who. Didn't like that moment, but the point is, it's a character moment. That's the point. Ignore her speech. Ignore anti-plastic. It's her coming to the rescue. It's the point of the end of this story.
Yes.
Why you would not be able to see that, I don't know. But those sorts of people are still with us.
Well, indeed. I mean, if I made a note on Spearhead, which I then decided to pass over because it was far too petty. But since you brought it up here, it's an appetite point to make now. In episode 2, there's a bit where they're talking about the plastic, and this has been analysing it, and she proudly proclaims that the plastic has no polymer chains in it, and it's just like. If we're going to put on our science hats, then the entire idea of plastic without any polymer chains in it is just as ridiculous as anti-plastic. So,
in case I didn't make that clear, the point I was trying to make was that you don't even need to invent symbolic science. I mean, that lesson has not been applied uniformly throughout New Who. There's been just as much bollock science. Possibly in the second, more recently after Russell's era. But I wish I'd stuck with anti-plastic. I wish every story was resolved with whatever.
Isn't it called
exactly.
It's the same for the same reason that people who complain that the sonic screwdriver is a bad thing because it means the Doctor can get out of a locked room. I'm sure I've said this before. If you think the point of Doctor Who is to lock the Doctor up and see and have him use a new method every week to get out of his locked room, then bugger off and watch something else. Let me. Oh dear!
It's not the Crystal Maze.
Watch. Exactly. It's a MacGuffin. It's not even a MacGuffin. Pretend I didn't say it was a MacGuffin because it only shows up at the end and then it's used immediately.
So I think we should probably aim to wind this up now. So are there any remaining things anyone wanted to say about Rose that you haven't had a chance to get off your chest?
just briefly like to say how refreshing I found watching Billy as Rose herself in this. It was quite a revelation to be reminded of how. So if I say young and fresh, that sounds slightly pervy, but no, just how how bright, let's say bright-eyed and bushy-tailed she was at the start, in the first series, I think, and how much we all enjoyed. I think I certainly enjoyed her performance and felt she brought a lot to it and was a great added so much to it, and having got slightly jaded with the character as she later returned, and it's a nice reminder of why we loved her.
Having watched this just today and not having seen it for a long time, but I thought her performance was ever so slightly different to how I remembered it, and I just wonder if anybody else thinks that perhaps it evolved, maybe, I don't know, either steadily or even quite rapidly in the early parts of Series 1. Did anyone think
I think
even the voice
from
is slightly
the second
different.
series.
Yeah. Do you think because
I mean, it's definitely completely different to when she came back in Series 4.
But she said that, didn't she? She admitted she couldn't remember.
But I think it is a little bit different from how it was in the second series.
There's one thing I'd like to mention. The Doctor's introduction to the story. He's tracked down the Nestine's, whatever it is, control device, and he blows it up. He doesn't deactivate it, which is what we would expect him to do, either in most stories before or since. He doesn't, and even having decided to use brute force, he doesn't hit it with a hammer or use a small bomb. He uses a bomb that's big enough to destroy an entire department store and bring 15 fire crews in. In context of the rest of the series, it seems out of character. And also, if it's your first experience with this Doctor, which it would have been for a lot of the intended audience, does he look like a terrorist or a madman? I mean, I know he's supposed to seem a bit dangerous, and maybe that's why Russell chose to do it that way, but any thoughts? Is it just because it looks more visual? It seems slightly careless to me, because it could put some people off and could send you off in a slightly different part of who this man is.
Interesting, and we're possibly grateful that they broadcast this before 7/7 happened. And that the whole series was out of the way before that. Which obviously would have, can you imagine if that would have put a whole damper on things. I think in retrospect, the idea that he is rather more gung-ho and reckless, and he says, I might die, and the idea that he doesn't really care is actually, it does work very well in retrospect for the post-Time War Doctor, who's more used to taking extreme measures.
I suppose the Doctor does blow a lot of things up, and I suppose maybe I'm being parochial here, because when he blows up similar bases, buildings, control centres, spaceships, things on other planets, I just think, ooh, look, pretty explosion. And maybe I'm just being parochial and think, what a nice old building. Did he really need to burn that down?
But he doesn't, yes.
So maybe, I don't know. I don't know whether there's anything in that point or not. I'll go back to sleep.
Just a small skirmish compared with the Time War, I suppose.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is that this is the best new Doctor story since Spearhead, because I'm not overly keen on some of the other ones. As you know, I don't like Robot. I'm not particularly.
I know you don't like Robot.
I'm not keen on Castrovalva, and I certainly don't like Twin Dilemma, or what is it, Time on the Rani. So, and
well, when you put it like that,
this is why it is.
There's a lot of competition, isn't there?
There's none.
So is this a classic damning with faint praise?
Sort of. No, look, I think I was at the time. I was so happy to have it back that I would have accepted anything really, and it's a little bit better than what we've had before. So it was good.
Have we done enough comparison between these two stories? Have we done any? We've just done the odd bit here and there.
I think doing a bit of a. I think wrapping up with a bit of a. We don't necessarily have to say which was our favourite, but I think.
Oh no!
But I think it would be nice to just do a bit of a little review of what do we feel we've gained by watching. Has it changed our perspectives on them and so on?
I mean, look at it this way: the most obvious link, which is why we're here, between these two stories is that they are both Auton stories. Is it the fact they're both first stories for Doctor and also Auton stories, which makes it...
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Because either of those in
Yeah.
itself would be a link. Now look, that's novel in itself because they were a brand new invention in 1970, and they were kind of a statement of intent of what the program could do, or what Robert Holmes could do for the program. He could bring it down to the earth, make the familiar unfamiliar and scary. In 2005, they're kind of that for the new viewers, and also something reassuring for the old fans. So they serve a dual purpose. I suppose fundamentally, though, Russell wouldn't have been worrying about us, and they are there to do the same thing they did in 1970, to make you sit up and take notice. That's why the aliens come in the second week. Do you think they have any hope of having the same impact, the Autons, in 2005 as they did in 1970? Because I think they're slightly underused even within the story. It's a bit half-hearted. Even though we actually see them crashing through plate glass windows here, and so in some senses the final battle should be more impressive, somehow it seemed like a good idea on paper.
It doesn't feel like it is happening all over the world, does it? It feels like it's happening in a shopping centre
In Cardiff.
Jackie is.
I mean, sorry, London. Not Cardiff, obviously.
Well, that's the perennial problem they have with sort of staging stuff on on the BBC budget and trying to make it look global. You probably don't need that cutaway. But I don't know. In Rose, the Autons are very much just there as a we don't really get all that much of them, and they're not exactly well developed, and obviously there's no Channing exactly. There's no real. We don't find out all that much about their motivation. They're just there to be a big bad and introduce us to the Doctor and his world.
There's no mind control
so I think,
either.
No, and I think given the pacing, you can't do. And again, Spearhead, it's very, very cleverly paced because you kind of get the plastic connection in episode 2. The meteorites in episode 1, the plastic connection in episode 2. I can't quite remember when the dummies, when the Auton dummies come in towards the end of episode 2 and into 3, I think, and then the sort of replicate ones going into episode 4, and you gradually see this scaling up of their capabilities, I guess. And so when you then get the shop window dummies bursting out, you've had that seeded that they are, that they can control anything. Whereas in this, they rather throw away the big crap, the dummies are alive.
Yeah.
Moment,
yes, it
because
is.
it's the first thing you see.
To be honest, it does just use it uses the Autons as a succession of striking visual moments which don't entirely hang together. And the bin thing is an example of that, because though that's played entirely for laughs, that's could have been a branch of story heading off into some much scarier territory. If they can take hold of any plastic, like your wheelie bin, then who knows where they're going to strike from. But then we're back to just shop window dummies again.
Yeah, interestingly, the wheelie bin, I noticed the first shot as the Doctor is seeing Rose off the premises and she's running away from the department store. There's a brief pick-up on a wheelie bin by the back door that she comes out of, and I thought that's there deliberately. This is like a seeding the idea of wheelie bins for later.
But at the end of the day, he's just used what he needed of the Autons to create.
Yes, yeah. I don't think
to wake the audience up and discarded the rest.
I don't think you can criticise it as being a poor Auton story, because that's not what it's.
No.
Yeah, because it's not there to serve the Autons. It's there to serve the Doctor and Rose. That story, definitely.
So the other link between the two is, how does it serve at introducing the character of the Doctor and indeed the idea of Doctor Who or this version of Doctor Who to a new audience?
Well, again, it introduces those tropes again. There's the stuff about the Time War, the Shadow Proclamation gets its first mention, that sort of thing. That sow the seeds for further on in the series, in a similar way that Spearhead sort of introduces certain Doctor characteristics as well. In here, it's the sort of recklessness of the Doctor, and because of that sort of not really caring because of what's happened with the Time War, and also his regret about what's happened when he's talking to the Nestine about what happened to their planet and stuff like that. And that sort of runs through as well. So it does introduce... So they both have very sort of strong parallels in that they introduce certain things that will be carried forward throughout the series.
Yeah, in terms of the companion, in Rose, she's kind of the archetypal companion. We watch it through her point of view, and her horizons are broadened immeasurably. She's introduced this man who is, if you hang around with him, things will be dangerous, there will be death, but life will never be dull again. And that's really the story of all new series companions and quite a few of the old series. And Liz, on the other hand, is the most atypical element of Spearhead, because while that's sort of true for her, it's never going to be quite the same, because she's as they used to say in fandom, she's an assistant, not a companion. She's never giddy with excitement to this new world. She's extremely sceptical, and it sort of sets up the tension within that character, and it's her relationship with Unit and the Doctor and the series in general, which carries on throughout her stories and is never really resolved.
And the big Brigadier in particular, yeah.
As for the character of the Doctor, the one thing that Spearhead sets up, which again is kind of unique to the third Doctor, is that he is not happy about being there. He's not going to be taking people off on exciting new adventures. He's not saying, "Come with me." He's saying, "Oh, bloody hell! Have I got to? Am I stuck with you?" Which is not thankfully a theme throughout the entire story. It's just there. It's just set up as much as it needs to be.
Yeah. Although, funnily enough, later on in the Third Doctor's era, when he could get away, he seems to been attached to them.
Yeah. No. Well, it's a nice arc, even though presumably wasn't planned in advance. It is nice that by the time he finally is able to leave, after wishing for nothing else through most of that time, now he realises he's got something to stay for. It's quite nice.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been done better. It couldn't have been done better if it was planned.
He hasn't shouted at all of the civil servants.
No, and he's still got membership of his club.
That's true.
There's always that to come back to. It's his favourite high-backed armchair, and that he misses. Not the Brigadier.
And the cheese and wine as well.
A glass of cognac.
Well, they're the same, and yet they're completely different.
Yes.
We've nailed that. They're both great, and they're both awful. as usual, we've.
I found going back and watching Spearhead for this a lot more rewarding than I found watching Rose. I kind of felt, whether that's just because Rose is more recent, whether I feel like Rose is less open to a bit more deeper analysis, or whether I just only watched Spearhead more superficially in the past. But so I found that the more certainly in terms of the volume of notes and things I took on it, I found that there was a lot more. I thought, oh, that's interesting, and that's cute. That's a nice little spot.
Doctor Who's never been made for repeated viewing, has it? And we were told constantly that people in the 60s and 70s were just trying to get anything out there on air. And you might think that the producers now are taking more account of the fact that people like us are going to carry on watching it on reruns and on DVD, but I don't know if you can never really think like that while you're trying to create something. And yet, even with all that in mind, Rose is a bit disposable, and it's just moments that I appreciate most. There's some really brilliant moments in it, but as a whole, it just does its job.
Yes.
But it's a herald of better things to come. It's there to ensure that people stay watching until the good stuff arrives for me. Now, that obviously isn't what Russell was intending to do, but that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it being very lightweight, so actually, viewing it again for this, it kind of seemed a bit better than I remembered it. But I still can't see myself going back again and again. Whereas I think Spearhead does have it does bear up to repeated viewings.
Sure does.
Which is just as well, really, considering how many times it's been released.
Shown in Australia. Yeah. I'd actually made half a page of notes before I even watched it, by the way, of little things that I remembered from it, and then just sort of worked out where that sort of fitted in the whole story. So repeated viewing, you do remember. I do remember things, whereas Rose, I didn't remember much at all.
I have to say, I think even within the oeuvre of Russell T Davies himself, it's obviously a very minor work. So I don't think we should be feel guilty
No.
about viewing it that way. If you assume that, even if you don't think, if you're one of those people who don't think he's a great science fiction writer, which I believe there are, or Doctor Who writer, which I believe there are people who have that opinion, they normally can agree that he's good at characterization and good at dialogue.
Yeah.
And even here, I think the characterization is a bit thin. He sketches the outline of Rose and the Doctor, but Mickey is an absolute mess of a character at this point, and he needn't be. So I think even there it only does as much as it needs to grab your attention.
Yeah.
But there's some
Jackie's
lovely.
quite broad
Jackie's
in this, I
great.
think, as well.
She gets some of the best lines, but they're not. It's great stuff, and it's there so that again another tiny segment of the audience can think, "Oh, she's fun. I like her. That's good. I'll carry on watching." But whether it has anything to do with what's going on, it's a bit self-indulgent, really, because Russell enjoys writing that sort of stuff.
Okay, so we've reached the end of our discussion for episode 2 of Something Who. So thanks all of you for joining. Thanks, Giles.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for coming. For spending your bank holiday in Australia.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And Paul, thank you.
Hey? Oh yeah, cheers. That's fine. I was here anyway.
Yeah. And please come back and join us again in about a month's time when we do episode 3. And thanks to all of you for listening too.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Keep it real.
Yeah. So the way we're going to start, Paul, is you're going to say the first line.
Oh, right.
That's a novelty.
So you've not laid the script out in the fashion I've become accustomed to. No. Okay, here we go.